Hey, how are you? Welcome to this video about working with your emotions, emotional wellness, emotional nourishment, and mental health. All of these topics fall under the symbolism of the moon. So we're going to explore in this video what the moon symbolizes, how to work with this energy, and particularly how to work with this if you're coping with emotional stress or emotional distress, and even working with mental health as well. So these are all always relevant topics, but I thought it would be very appropriate for this period in time. So why the moon? The moon symbolizes overarching themes of emotion, of how it is that we process emotions, how it is that emotions come up inside of us, and our subjective awareness. So much of our subjective experience is emotional, it is personal, it is in the moment. And the moon is also associated with what I'll call your personal unconscious. So if you're familiar with psychology or Carl Jung's work, you know that he spoke about the collective unconscious. So the collective unconscious is archetypes or themes within humanity that run that are not personal, that run along the path of humanity. So archetypes like the mother archetype, the hero's journey, the warrior archetype. When I say the energy of the mother or the warrior or the father or the hero, you get a feeling for what that means. You don't have to personally be a mother to have that energy inside of you. That is collective unconscious. In contrast, the moon is about personal unconscious. So the memories and feelings and thought patterns, the storylines that you tell yourself, that's kind of like running in the background. Again, it's not conscious, you're not actively aware of it. These patterns that come from your upbringing, from this physical material life. So for this reason also, the moon is associated with early years, infancy, like age 0 to let's say 5, those very formative years. And in these years, science has shown that brain waves in toddlers is actually different than adults. Their brain waves are the ones that we go into when we are sleeping or when we're dreaming, or it's like a very, it's about taking things in. And so we know through scientific studies that people, that humans will absorb information. You may have seen this if you've been around toddlers. They absorb things like a sponge. And then these patterns, these ideas, these storylines are within a person throughout their lifetime. And so the moon is a symbol of this. So for this reason, if you wanted to work with your emotional health and your emotional well-being, you would get to know moon energy in general, and how to nourish and nurture yourself, but more importantly, how to what we'll call reparent yourself. So what I mean by that is learning how to self-soothe yourself, learning how to set boundaries for yourself and keep those boundaries, how to make promises to yourself and to keep those promises. These are all things that I would lump into reparenting. And so pulling back a little bit, looking at the big picture, I see the moon and Saturn as the planets that I would look to when a person is in need of reparenting. And we know that someone is in need of that if they're feeling high amounts of stress and anxiety, along with feeling like they have no control over their life. If you feel like life is kind of happening to you, it can be helpful to work with reparenting techniques. Again, working with things like taking care of yourself, getting enough sleep, getting enough food that's good and nourishing, and kind of setting structures and setting rules into place for yourself. So Saturn I think of as the material world kind of structures and patterns, like you're going to have this certain regimen for yourself, where this is a diet guideline that you follow, this is the amount of sleep that you need, etc. Those are like more tangible things, whereas the moon energy is more about emotional caretaking, and it's less results oriented. Like Saturn is very specific, it's very quantifiable, it's very measurable, whereas moon energy, it's not. It's more qualitative, it's not measurable in numbers and words, it's more of a feeling. So so how to work with this? Before I move on, I want to just make sure I didn't miss something. Oh, so the moon is also a symbol of so it is a symbol of nurturing, and I think when we're talking about emotional health and mental health, it is an issue of nurturance. It is an issue of what it is that you need in order to feel nourished. The moon is about nourishment, and what you need at an emotional level to feel safe and secure. And so we're going to talk in a moment about how to work with that based on what the moon is doing and what is present for you in your life, and then your birth chart. But I want you to be thinking about that when you feel stressed, when you feel anxious. Typically it is because there is a sense of feeling unsettled because your needs are not being met in some way. And it's kind of an interesting dynamic that we have as human beings, right? Where we are responsible for ourselves, but then we're also interdependent on one another. And so that being said, we can only control our own responses to things. So that's a big theme with the moon, is nurturing. For this reason, the moon is also a symbol of motherly or maternal type figures. So that can be literally the way that you feel and about and interact with any maternal type figures that you have in your life, or just that feeling of how it is that you caretake for yourself. Moon, of course, is also a symbol of cycles and the ebb and flow. I've been working with recently the I Ching, and what I think is really fascinating about that system is the core of that system is that everything is always changing, and there's polarity. So when one thing is here, it's really just a precursor to changing to the other thing, and vice versa. So there's this constant, when you do an I Ching reading, you look at what's happening right now, but then you also keep in mind that there are certain elements that are on the cusp of changing. And I think this is interesting, especially if you are working with the lunar cycles in any way, or if you want to tap into moon energy, because the nature of the moon is that it's always changing. It's the fastest body that we track in astrology. It moves through the zodiac in a month, essentially, staying in each sign for just about 2-ish days. And no other planet or body moves that quickly. And this is also interesting because our emotions have a very similar phenomenon, right? You can be feeling one thing one moment, and then something happens, you have an interaction, or you see something, or you feel something, or you change your environment in some way, or you find out a new piece of information, and it can totally change your mood. It's very fleeting. I don't know about you, but I've noticed for myself and other people as well that we can kind of go through cycles in our emotionality as well. through mental health as well. You know, some days may be more challenging than others, and I find that sometimes it is a cycle and you find yourself going back through a similar pattern over and over again. So I think this is important to keep in mind because our culture embraces finding something really good and really wonderful and then doing more of that and trying to keep that at the same time. And stagnation can happen when we do that. And even when something is very fantastic, there is this sometimes sliver of fear that it will go away. And this can lead to a fear of change. So the moon reminds us that nothing is permanent, that everything is changing all the time, and that we're going back through as well. That no moment will ever be exactly the same, but we get a chance to return to things in a different way, in a different place. Let's see, what else? I feel like there's a few other notes that I wanted to share with you. Of course, the moon is also about cleansing, healing, anything involving water or bodies of water. Moon is also, I found recently, a symbol of crystals as well, so I thought that was really interesting. It is a symbol of the menstrual cycle and the female reproductive system, pregnancy, midwives, nurses, caretakers, etc. And the moon is a symbol of gathering, of community. And this especially is very present in when we're working with world astrology or mundane astrology. The moon is a symbol of the people, the people within a community that come together. And I think that's really interesting too, because we're talking about emotions and mental health, and that gets lumped in with a planet that is also about community and being connected to one another. So I think that's some interesting food for thought. All right, so when you're feeling stressed and anxious or sad, or just it feels like things are off at an emotional level, maybe even this can happen as well. Maybe you're processing your emotions physically. Marion Woodman called this somaticizing, where there is stress and then that somehow becomes present in your body. An upset stomach, muscle tension, anything could I've seen some weird stuff happen. But so if that is happening, what to do? So I think the biggest thing that we can do for ourselves is notice where there is an imbalance, where there's either too much or not enough of something. And the most basic way to do this is to notice your energy levels and your activity levels. So like how active you are, how much you're doing, how much output is happening, how much social connection you're receiving versus not receiving. And you know more than you think you do very often what it is that you need. And I find that it helps as well to keep an open mind, because we don't always need the same things every single season of our life. So we're always changing, right? And maybe one thing that's worked for you to nourish yourself is just not doing it anymore. What is it that you need now? And the moon asks us to find and incorporate what it is that we need right now. What would feel really good? What would feel good for you today? Like literally today, I want you to think about that. Would it feel good to connect with someone? Would it feel good to do nothing, read a book, watch a movie, or something else? I don't know. So we can make this more nuanced and personal and specific to you by looking at your personal birth chart as well. And so this is something that's helpful to look at over the course of your life. And the more that you look at your birth chart, the more that you get an understanding for what is essential for you over the course of your lifetime. And again, of course, that's going to change depending on the life situations that you're in. So if you and I were sitting together, what I would look at is a few different techniques, I guess I would call them, related to your moon. So if you're watching this, you might be familiar with looking at your moon sign. That can be super helpful. I also find that as important, if not more important than the sign, is looking at the house that the moon is located in, because the sign is a descriptor, it's like an adjective, and the house is the outlet for that action. So like Aries moon, if a person has their moon in the sign of Aries, this is about taking risks, it's about acting quickly, it's about instant gratification. And that there needs to be something that is overcome. There's a sense of confidence that comes from confrontation. So people with Aries moon, all other things withstanding, that is important to them. And they tend to feel like restless or anxious if they don't have those things. Now, this is going to be very different for a person that has that Aries moon in, let's say, the first house, house of self and identity, versus the fourth house, home and family, versus the 10th house, career. So if we were looking at the 10th versus the 4th, that's going to be so different, because these people need to apply their emotional qualities in completely different areas of life. Now, the other piece of this too is we want to look at aspects that the moon is making, especially if it's making aspects to outer planets, to Uranus, Neptune, or Pluto. That's going to add a definite flavor. Saturn as well. And then of course the other planets, the inner planets as well. And let's see. And the other part of that too that gets a little more specific is I would want to look at what's called the dignity of the moon and those other planets. So how, for lack of a better term, how happy is the moon there? Is the moon in a position of strength from traditional terms? Because that's going to tell me how easy or difficult it is for a person to work with their emotional health. And it's also going to tell me the ways in which a person can channel their activities in their life so that they feel a sense of nurturance and a sense of support from the world. For example, if you are this Aries moon person and you're in an environment that requires you to do work that is very long term, is very focused, is very kind of like unending, like there's never really a completion date, like let's say research work, like psychological research. There might be other things in that person's chart that bring them into that work in a place of satisfaction, but there's always going to be some kind of agitation there for this person. So this doesn't mean, of course, that, you know, that person needs to change careers. We don't all have that luxury, but it does mean that this person would benefit from finding a way, finding a place for their moon in their life, knowing what qualities they need to feel emotionally satisfied, and then bringing that into their life. And the other piece of this too is that you know, you create you create a lot of what's happening in your life by the people, places, and situations that you surround yourself with. And so I want you to be thinking, if you are working with anxiety or sadness or grief, what things and people and situations, what things like that are exacerbating or bringing a sense of calm and soothing to you. And a part of working with the moon is that reparenting element, is choosing consciously, okay, this is something that I know is good for me. This is something that I know is not good for me, or I need it in small doses at this point in time. So I would love to hear from you, and if this is helpful, let me know. If you want to explore your moon a little bit more, there's a book I wanted to recommend. This is fantastic for all things moon. It's Moon Signs by Donna Cunningham. So the title is Moon Signs, but this is a wealth of information working with your natal moon and then also working with the lunar cycles as well. So it's a fantastic read if you're interested in lunar things. And of course, if you're interested in working with your personal birth chart and something more specific in your life, let me know. I would be happy to do an astrological consultation for you. You can email me at shaunamcgrath@gmail.com, or you can book a session on my website, shaunamcgrathastrology.com. I'm sending you lots of love and wishing you a wonderful week. Take care.